All right. Esi Eggleston Bracey in the house. Thank you for joining. Last time we did this, it was April, and man, has the world continued to change.
Absolutely. How are you, Rachel? Good to see you.
You too. Well, one day I can't wait for us to actually hang out in person, or our friendship is happening via the virtual world.
Who knows when that will be these days? You
I
cannot
know.
count on it. So
I
virtual it
know.
is.
Well, I mean, we got to remain optimistic somehow. But it's funny. I was thinking about how much has happened in the world since we last did this in late April. And it's kind of crazy. Unemployment hits an all-time high. We see retailers and rental car companies file for bankruptcy. Stay-at-home orders are starting to lift in some states. We've seen an uptick in COVID cases. George Floyd is killed. America starts to protest, finally, that Black Lives Matter. And the Supreme Court stands behind LGBTQ workers' rights. And this has all happened since just the end of April. And while this has happened, I've also been paying attention to the Unilever stock price. And the last 30 days, that's gone up. So my question to you is, how are you managing all of this?
I think we all just realize there have been incredibly dynamic times. And I think the unexpected lockdown was a bit of training to help us understand, how do we lead for these times now? And you say, how are we managing all of this? And it's very similar to what we talked about before. It starts with the people, and it's people first. And then in the context of people first, what does that mean? That almost sounds like a platitude, but it really is being connected with people to understand where we are, both our capacity and both our mindset. Like for me, the past month has been a tremendous emotional roller coaster, right? As it's been for a lot of people, but everyone experiences things differently. And I've said to my team, where you are is where you are. There's no good or bad, it's where you are. As long as we're in conversation about where we are, so that we can figure out where we'd like to be, and then what are the steps to getting there. So I would say the first health crisis, call it the COVID crisis, was more practice for that. Right? How we take our values and put them into action so that we can be connected, so that we can make the critical business pivots needed. And then when I think about the social justice, the racial equity crisis, the racial justice crisis, that's yet another opportunity for that. And when I look, there's so much to say about that, where to start. I said it's been, for me personally, an emotional roller coaster. Because in the 30 years that I've been in corporate America, what you learn to do as a Black woman in America, living in America, is you learn to put on an armor. We come from such a foundation of resilience. If you think about 400 years of slavery, if we think about the years of Jim Crow, if we think about segregation, and that we've only been in a construct that wasn't legally unequal, for 55 plus years. That's fairly new in society, that you put on your armor, you deal with the world around you, you keep one foot in front of the other, because your legacy is one of strength and resilience. So for me, that armor looks like not always being vulnerable, even though, I'm open and I connect with my teams, but in terms of like what my life experience is every day. And then going through, as I talked to you before, like, the leaders need to be more open than ever before. So leading my big team through my personal journey, was like an emotional roller coaster, opening up, in terms of what it's like for my son and my husband and my daughter and my father and what it was like to watch George Floyd's life seep away, which was not an isolated incident. It's a tipping point of issue after issue, what it's like. And then in the next meeting, it's time to make the donuts, kind of in and out and in and out. So for many, it's been that roller coaster, right? That for me, another opportunity to lean into my connectivity and my vulnerability. And then out of that, commit to something different, right? And, I just am continually grateful to work for Unilever, which is a foundation for support, which I always am surprised to hear myself say that, because I've never been someone that waves a corporate flag or a bandwagon. Even though I worked in corporate America for nearly 30 years, I was never that pro-corporate person. But I just look at the team and the openness to the conversations and to where we need to go in the world has been a source of inspiration.
So, I mean, you just said so much, and I want to unpack some of it. So, you're the COO of Unilever's personal care and beauty business. You're one of the top executives at Unilever, and you're a Black woman. What do you feel is your role and your responsibility within Unilever right now when it comes to Black Lives Matters?
So I have two responsibilities. One, I am the business leader that happens to be a woman of color, and any business leader should be leading for change right now. Okay. Two, I am a person who's impacted and affected and have always been an advocate for change. So how I'm taking on that role is championing and leading for change across my organization. But I'm also saying to my teams, it's our role, the leader's role, to drive the change. It's not the role of the brown and Black people in the organization, because the brown and Black people are the victims of the oppression. But Black and brown people who want to have a voice and are ready to help drive the change, please, let's partner together. But what's happened, and what's been my experience in corporate America, it's disproportionately expected that the Black and brown people drive the change. And having played that role for so many years, I will tell you, we're tired. We're tired of that. But then I have a different way, which is I'm the business leader. I can't be tired.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
It's up to me to drive the change, and we are. And you know what I say to, I'm sorry, go ahead, Rachel.
Yeah, I want to understand how, like the how behind that.
The how. So I say four things to my team. And the thing about every company brand is in a different place. So Unilever has already a real commitment to social justice and to equity, but we have so much work to do. We're not there like the rest of America does. So what I say to the team is seize the moment. There's no better moment than now. 5 months ago, hashtag Black Lives Matter was a political statement. Now it's mainstreamed. Why I say seize the moment is none of us are where we need to be. So we can stand together in our vulnerability and acknowledge we have our work cut out for the intention that we have to be a more inclusive company and to drive for a more inclusive society. So we can together, I exaggerate and say, yeah, we can stand on the table kind of naked in company. It's uncomfortable when you're by yourself, but we're in company. So let's seize this moment. There's no reason to be afraid, right? And then in seizing the moment, we've got to get our house in order, because we've got intentions. I've been talking about for the past 3 years what I call the polycultural America. What that means, the polycultural America, is America looks different today than it did 30 years ago. People talk about soon in America, and they often say that's in 2030 or 2050, what's considered the minority will be the majority. But I say that is here now. If you look at Gen Zs, 48% of Gen Zs are people of color. If you look at Gen Zs being the largest demographic generation group, I mean, you just look, there's so much difference in the demographics already today. The change is now. But if we look at, what it is that we have to do in terms of getting our house in order, we need to have a community that is representative of the population we serve. We need the representation, and we're not there, similar to corporate America. So we can stand in those commitments. We need to do more with diverse suppliers, and we've made a commitment to step up our spending with diverse suppliers, and there are a range of other commitments that we've made. You can stand in where you are and then speak out to what you're committed to, and then you work the plan to do that. So the third thing that I say to the team is ensure that we're of service to Black consumers. And that is end to end. And the fourth thing I say is focus on systemic change, because what times can have you do like these, Again, this is not a moment. This is a movement. This is not a catalyst. This is a tipping point. It's to focus on the now. When it's been 400 years of oppression, how long have we been talking about these issues? So we've got to focus on the issues that will drive the systemic change. Those are the 4 things I leave my team with. And in terms of the how, it's being vulnerable. It's having those connected, authentic conversations. Where you are is where you are. And my team is embracing those, as challenging as they are. The tears that I've seen from the diverse group of people in my team being in pain from the issue, and the questions about why, I don't understand why, that are also there. That's good to engage. So starting with authenticity and vulnerability, and then commit and take action. Because, you see the sentiment, talk is cheap. Talk's an important start. I think you need the talk and you need the actions. And there's systemic, consistent actions that are not about looking good. Because today it's very, success doesn't look like a that a boy. Because there's a lot of frustration. It's about taking actions that make a difference and have impact.
I mean, once again, you just said a lot that's there. A lot of the things that you spoke about, I imagine, are going to take time at Unilever to develop, right? Like new talent pools to recruit from, like RFPs to diverse suppliers. And then you have like your short-term needs, which is the stock price, right? And driving the bottom line at Walmart. As a leadership team, how are you going to balance the short-term and the long-term?
Yeah, well, the good thing with Unilever is we already have a construct for integrating this idea of people, communities, and the business. We call it our compass. And our compass in the center is to make sustainable living commonplace in the center. And then we believe that companies with purpose last, brands with people grow, and that people with purpose thrive. So we integrate all those things together. You asked about short and long term. I'm commenting on the business versus social justice goals. So it matters to people. Retailers are demanding changes. Consumers and people are demanding changes. Society is demanding change. So if we want our business to exist and to grow, we have to change. They are not separate. So the first thing is that's integrated. And then we balance the short, mid, and long term the way we do business overall. You're always managing that short, mid, and long term. You set short-term goals. What I always say to my team is you look out on the horizon and you declare where you want to be, and then you look down and you create the milestones to get you to the horizon. And you measure your success against each of those milestones and progress against the horizon. So in this space of racial equity, both internal, get our house in order, and external, make an impact, we do the exact same thing.
No, that's so wise. You spoke a lot about vulnerability and connecting with your team. And, I imagine not everyone on your team is a person of color. And so what's your advice to people who are not people of color when they're witnessing racism in the workplace? How should they address it?
Yeah, just be clear. Most of my team are not people of color. So everything that I said applies to my team. We had a Juneteenth recognition, like many companies took the day off. We spent the morning engaging as a team and then had the afternoon off. And we did 3 things. One is we did a healing circle for Black employees. Then we did an immersion and culture session for all of our employees. And then we did a special section on marketing. And who presented that plan? We have something called Unilever Marketers Against Racism. Non-people of color. I mean, presenting our statement and philosophy against racism. And in that, it was reflecting on the role that our brands would play or have played in contributing to stereotypes. The brands, the industry role the industry brands have played in contributing to stereotypes, starting first with seeing where we are and being authentic, and then declaring where we want to go in the future. So I would say it is society's job to do. Again, it's not that of Black and brown people. And so in that, we own it to make the change. It's ours. When I say ours, you always wonder, when I say ours, am I speaking, is it Black or brown people, or is it ours as the leaders of the business? I mean ours in that ladders, leaders of the business. And we own it because it's a human issue. It's ours to do. So that's what I say. And it starts with humanity. So when I talked about the conversations with my team, this is majority non-Black and brown people. And these are the tears, the testimonies, the questions. So it starts first with, don't worry about getting it right. That is one of the largest problems that we have, is this area of being authentic and vulnerable versus being politically correct and afraid of saying the wrong thing. So we've got to open the door to those candid, authentic conversations, but they come out of a stance. Like, I'm in conversations with, I think about my daughter who's having these conversations at school. There's one thing when you have conversations that are out of, tell me why it's this way and why are your people rioting? There's another thing to have the conversations through the stance that we believe in equity, we believe in equality, we believe in racial justice, we believe in hashtag Black Lives Matter. Help me understand the pain in the community. There's one conversation that's out of a commitment, and there's another conversation out of, this is wrong, I'm not sure, let's justify. So my stance is have a conversation out of a commitment, and then we can have the space to be vulnerable, to learn together, and then we can educate one another.
No, it's so powerful. And it makes me think, like, everything that Unilever's doing, I hope one day could become open source, because you guys have developed such amazing content that other companies could learn from. And, you have a lot of different diverse communities within Unilever. You have people who identify as queer, and you have people who are handicapped, and you have the Black community. So at a time like right now, where a lot of the energy is focused on like racial equality, how do you make sure that other minority groups still feel represented in the change?
That's a very, very good question. And again, my context is more through, we have been focused on more inclusivity and what I call the big D in diversity. And so we've been on so much of what we do. Again, when I talk about polycultural, I don't typically talk about Black Americans. I talk about Black and brown Americans, and and inclusive of that is Latin, Asian, African American. I also talk about young people, and I talk about cash-strapped people. So I'm always talking about the big D. Where I'm being really clear now is, so then what does that mean for Black Americans that we're all of service to? Your question was, how do we make sure we're all included? And those are some of the conversations we have on the team. We all support a mindset of that there is not, how do I call this? It's not a zero-sum game. That it's not one community gets love and the other doesn't get love. We stand in, when you serve the underserved, it's better for us all. Okay. And when it's better for us all, it's better for underserved groups and overserved groups. And that's what I say. I've seen that journey for women. As companies have gotten more inclusive for women, they've gotten more inclusive for everyone, because you learn a degree of cultural sensitivity and inclusivity and a lack of assumption. So that's one. And then two, you find some groups that are the tipping point of the issues and concerns. So there's always going to be a flare up, right, of issues. And we've had issues around Black America versus Latin America. We've had conversations around that. The challenging thing with Black America is that, Blacks came over in shackles, not on boats. So the nature of the American mindset is so entrenched versus one of immigration. And brown people, Spanish speakers, are discriminated against every day. And an assumption is made by language. Assumption is made about wealth. So it's understanding the isms of each group. And when you have the empathy to understand for one, it creates the empathy to understand for another. So the short answer is, we're all in this together to overserve the underserved. That's where I start. And I identify that when you make it better for the underserved, it actually makes it better for the overserved. And avoid this myth that it's a zero-sum game. Better for one takes away from another. We're here to grow the pie.
I feel like that's the title of your future book, Underserved, Overserved. Final question for you. You said something that has stuck with me since April, because I'm a numbers person. And when COVID struck, you mentioned that Unilever sort of modeled out their business saying, listen, our employees are probably now operating at 70% productivity. Now that this cultural revolution has also been layered on top of COVID, does that 70% number still stand for you? Or have you began to model out your business differently in terms of employee productivity?
Overall, that number still very much holds, and it's an average. I can tell you the 2 weeks after George Floyd's murder, we were certainly operating at probably half of that capacity. But it was acute, and because we were all in shock and in trauma, and shifted again to what do we do about it. And since then, we are creating momentum and energy behind what we're doing about it. And so that capacity is coming back, but it is consistently uneven in the organization. I can't say that's true of everyone. I can't say. Like, if I think about my personal capacity, and I talked about the emotional roller coaster and the demands on my time from my kids, my daughter that wanted to get out and march and protest, that I felt wasn't safe because of COVID, and my son who just didn't want to talk about it anymore and wanted to cover his ears. So just the personal, the number of hours and the energy to where I am now, which is in continuing to engage and work the plan, more than these acute cuts that were happening, it seemed every other hour. If I just use my example as an illustration of that, the energy is coming in from trying to take action, not just trying, taking action and identifying the actions versus the pain of the injury. So that number it still stands, right? As capacity is building back up, it still stands, and it's in pockets. Right. Some with less and some with more.
Well, that anchor has stick with me as I do my operating plan. You're always in my head now. And thank you so much for your wisdom. It's unbelievable to just witness from the sidelines the work and the transformation that you're leading at Unilever. And I just really appreciate you sharing with everyone today.
Thank you, Rachel, for a chance to talk with you. It's always good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
Ciao.
Bye.
Stay safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.